Hello, welcome back to the United Mates Football Podcast. Today I am joined by Joe. We're going to be chatting a bit about England's unfortunate defeat at the hands of Italy in the Euro 2020 final. Day of recording is Monday, the day after that took place. Otherwise, Joe, how are you doing? And where were you when you watched the game? Obviously, you're based back in our hometown of London. I'm out here in LA. What were you up to when England were playing Italy?
Hello, Kai. It's good to be back. It's been a while, so it's nice. Euros are done and we're back on it with the United mates. Yeah, I'm feeling unsurprisingly disappointed. I really thought we were going to do it, and obviously, sadly, we didn't. I watched it at a friend's flat in Clapham in South London, and our mutual friend Adam Rose was actually there as well. So yeah, he was one of there was a few of us. I had a nice barbecue before. It was all going very well, and then yeah, we'll get onto it. But sadly, it didn't end too well. But what about you? Where were you watching it?
It was a reasonably authentic experience. Well, sort of in the sense that it was a pub full of English fans, but it was obviously out here in LA and it was an Irish pub. But the hosts were very gracious, and yeah, like I said, sort of like 95% England fans. There was a guy in an Inter Milan kit and some of his mates who ended up being sort of the Italy contingent. I guess the happy party at the end of the day. But as Joe said, we'll get into that. I guess we might as well do that right now. Do you want to kick things off maybe on a as far as let's do it. Positives for England from the tournament, from the final mostly, I suppose. Yeah, what can we be proud of and look forward to more of?
I guess the obvious place to start is that we got to a final, given that it had been 55 years since we'd last been in a major final. Well, any final for that matter. So I think you have to give this squad a lot of credit for that. There's previous England squads that arguably had more talent. Some of the golden generation squads, they never managed it. They never even managed semi-finals. So yeah, I think that's got to be where we start, isn't it?
Yeah, and on top of that, just being a penalty shootout away from winning the final. We're in the final. We almost won. It's not like we were battered or anything like that. We at the end of the day probably were outplayed by the Italians. I think that's sort of widely acknowledged that they were on the whole the best team throughout the tournament, and on the day as well yesterday the better side. But we can hold our heads up high. The performances, certainly defensively, we're just such a solid unit throughout the entire tournament. Obviously we gave up the goal to Bonucci. Pickford was really, really good. That's kind of encouraging given that our goalkeeping situation is sort of question marks over that. So I think that certain places on the pitch we don't have to be worried about for the next sort of 5 to 10 years. So it's a solid foundation to keep building upon.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess there are a lot of players, another positive that actually, I don't know if you credit Southgate for this or the players themselves or a bit of both, but to be honest, I don't think that many people going into the tournament had that high hopes for Jordan Pickford. He's one of them where, if I'm honest, I didn't want him to start. Obviously, he'd done well in Russia a few years ago, but he'd had a pretty poor season for Everton. I wasn't confident he'd be the guy to really, you'd really want him in the side in these big games. But in fairness, he's won the Golden Glove. He had, maybe one or two shaky moments throughout the tournament, but he was pretty damn good. And I mean, he saved two penalties in a final, in a penalty shootout. So yeah, I mean, you've got to really feel for Jordan that he hasn't ended up on the winning side there. And they were good saves as well. They weren't, they were like really decent.
Good. Like a double save from the Jorginho one as well.
Yeah. That was
rebounded back in. But yeah, I agree. I probably would have taken if he was fit, Nick Pope as the number one. I don't know how sort of widely held that opinion is back home. But I think again, you look at Donnarumma, Pope is massive also, like Donnarumma, and Courtois as well. Like these top goalkeepers, especially of this sort of like more recent generation, are just massive. So like I think I probably would have taken Pope.
I do wonder if Pope had been fit, if he maybe would have ended up starting. But then, in fairness to Southgate, he's loyal to players, and one of those was Pickford,
and Pickford did well.
You've got to say it worked. And then on that sort of topic of positivity and players Southgate's loyal to, another guy, if I'm being completely honest, who I didn't really want England to start was Sterling, Raheem Sterling. I mean, obviously he's a great footballer. I didn't think he'd had the best season. It seemed that he'd obviously been good for City in previous years. I feel like he hadn't played as much maybe this year. But my God, he was on the whole, but maybe our best player for it. I don't know. He was just I don't know if it's just we were playing a different style to City, but when he runs at defenders, they shit their pants. Basically, defenders basically seems to be the way it works.
Yeah. He's sort of like our Neymar on the ball, or as close as we're going to get in the team. I thought that Sterling had a brilliant tournament. There's a lot of people saying he was even, one of the players of the tournament, which I would agree with. He's got, that end product and defensive output too. The guy doesn't really stop running, defending from the front too. So I think Sterling is one of the players who really his sort of stock has risen throughout this tournament. After a sort of indifferent season, despite winning the league with City. I guess the real sort of question marks, I know this is the sort of positive section that we're supposed to be in, will be at sort of who else was out there sort of creating and attacking besides Sterling. That was one of our downfalls. But in between the goalkeeper and Sterling, there were other positive performances throughout from Maguire, who was fantastic, actually really good yesterday as well. Again, a shame that he was one of those players who ended up on the losing side. And then in midfield, Calvin Phillips. I thought Declan Rice was kind of unfortunate to be subbed off. I thought he was having actually quite a decent game.
Declan Rice. He honestly, he made a few of those. I think it was in the first half. He made 2 or 3 runs where he just he went past about 2 or 3 players each time. You could tell he was obviously so pumped for the final. And I mean, you'd think he's probably going to leave West Ham, but they'll probably, rightly so now, demand a lot of money for him because he's got that. I mean, look, there's the English premium price, but he genuinely looks like a top player. I think he's proved it. And like you were saying, Calvin Phillips as well. Again, I know he's been in the Premier League for a year now. There'd even been quite a lot of hype about him when he was playing in the Championship, but I don't think it was until seeing him at this tournament that I sort of truly saw how good he was, if I'm being honest.
He's the type of player that, Stephen Allendown, who we've had on the pod, our good friend, he's the type of guy who, if we were back at school, he would rave about every week or something like that. And just because he wasn't in the didn't watch the games, we would just be like, all right. But he is actually, he's really good, isn't he?
Yeah. He used to do that about, I think, Johnny Howson, maybe, back in the day, who sadly I don't think ever did play for England. But no, Phillips... Phillips was brilliant. It's an obvious one to speak about, especially because of last night, but Luke Shaw was brilliant.
He's really good. You have to be pleased for him as well after one of the worst leg breaks you're ever going to suffer in any player's career.
And I think we've spoken about, maybe not on the podcast, but we've definitely spoken about leading up to that leg break, he was looking so good for Man U. And even though there's this sort of joke about him, because he kind of looks a bit like he obviously doesn't look like the fittest footballer. I feel like that's sort of been a post-injury thing as well. I feel like when he was younger, there wasn't kind of this banter around Luke Shaw. I don't know if it's partly because obviously Jose Mourinho effectively started bullying him at Man U, which didn't help things. But no, it's pretty impressive to see how he's turned things around because many players who were in his situation, not just the Mourinho criticism, but literally having that awful leg break, wouldn't come back to the level he has managed to get to. So I mean, look, Chilwell didn't play 1 minute at not the World Cup, the Euros, and even though there was the COVID thing and Billy Gilmore, that's partly because Luke Shaw was just undroppable really when he was playing. He was that good, I think, most of the time.
Yeah, one of our star men, and I think probably another reason why we saw Sterling performed the way that he did in some ways, given that he had someone often when he was out on the left, Sterling in games, because he would sort of swap flanks, someone like Luke Shaw behind you that doesn't make it any harder to play well, that's for sure. You sort of have the defensive reliability behind you, knowing that he's probably going to mop it up, and then he's going to make those runs, pull defenders out of other opposition fullbacks out of position, and that creates space for Sterling to drive at and whoever's on the left to drive at. Shaw was a massive contributing factor, and you saw in the goal that he scored, sort of being able to overload, obviously. I mean the technique for the volley, the cross from Trippier is really good, and I think he also deserves a lot of credit for playing a bit part role, sort of a specialty role in this tournament for England, sort of just playing a few minutes here and there. Obviously was on the pitch for the delivery that he ended up providing only 2 minutes into the game for sure. So I guess that could be an example of Southgate managing the squad well. Maybe we'll turn the corner to these to the negative side of things, and that might be a place to start. Is Southgate's management of England in terms of negatives?
I think so. And also, I don't want to be too down on Southgate, given we've just got to a final, and he's proved a lot of people wrong, and he made bold decisions that a lot of people wouldn't have made, and he maybe went more defensive than many. When you look at on paper at the England squad, we had some of the best attacking players going, but we'll go to that. I mean, I guess I'll say, I know we got to the final. I know we were a penalty shootout away from winning, but it was quite negative a lot of the time. And especially just thinking about yesterday, I actually thought the first half we were brilliant and we were deservedly 1-0 up at half time. But quite early on in the second half, it became apparent that Italy were all over us. I think they had like 70% possession of the ball. And it felt like I don't know. He didn't. I just feel like Southgate didn't react quick enough. We didn't bring. I don't know. I think we didn't actually bring someone on until Bonucci had scored. But it felt for about 10 minutes before Bonucci scored, like the people I was watching the game with anyway, everyone was sort of saying, "Oh, we need fresh legs. We need fresh legs." He didn't do it. What do you think about that whole situation from yesterday? Did he just react too slowly, or did he just trust his players too much, arguably, or what was it?
No, I mean, thousands of miles away, I was saying the exact same thing to my friends who sort of, again, they're Americans, so it's not their sport. They were sort of enjoying the pub experience and the whole kind of, like the day out thing more than anything. So they didn't really understand as much what I was saying as the people around you would have been having a conversation about it. But no, essentially I said to them, Italy have made those subs. I think they brought on, was it Crescente maybe, and like Berardi or something like that, possibly prior to the goal.
I think so.
And that changed the game. You don't necessarily think like, oh, Crescente and Berardi, like game changers in a cup final, but they did. To be fair to them, it was more of a system change because Immobile was, to be honest with you, a bit useless on the day, and Mancini realized that, and so he changed the way that Italy were playing. And after that, it was pretty instant impact, and you could tell England needed to do something. Whether they needed a leader on the pitch to, sort of get a few players and let them know to, sort of step it up, or if they needed to freshen things up, neither of those things happened. And you could just tell the pressure was sort of building and building and building until the Bonucci equalizer. Again, fair enough, Pickford made a decent save in just before it went in. But yeah, I think Southgate's lack of sort of a decision in that moment to either maybe be the one from the sideline himself to rile up the guys or to make the actual substitution. I don't know what do you think that would have been? What sub would you have made?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it was a bit
maybe
like in the Denmark game.
Yeah, I think get a bit more possession, get a bit more thrust.
Yeah, I think probably maybe looking back, maybe Grealish for Mount would have been. I mean, I actually thought Mount played pretty well, to be honest, and he had it feels a bit not sarcastic, but he showed a lot of energy and he was pressing and stuff. But it felt like if we were going to sit deep, we needed someone when we did get the ball who could maybe unlock things a bit and kind of set us on the way. And it felt like we didn't really have that in the second half.
In the same note of players picking the ball up and gaining yards and sort of buying time for your team and saving energy on defending, massively disappointed not to see Sancho in the entire tournament as much as we saw him get one game there and then come on to take a penalty that he missed. But the guy's just gone to United for like nearly 90 million quid or something like that. So like how can he not? I know England have a good team, but like surely this guy's a starter for any international team pretty much.
I mean, pre the Euro starting, I remember when I was sort of, thinking of like my starting lineup for the Croatia game, I had Sancho in the starting lineup for that, as I think a lot of people did. And then he ominously didn't even make the bench, I remember, for that game. So there was at that point, it was clear something wasn't quite right, because that wasn't due to an injury. That was a tactical decision. Yeah, it's odd with Sancho because I can't claim to watch loads of the Bundesliga. Whenever I've seen Sancho play, he always looks quality, and his stats seem to back that up as well. And hence why, like you said, he's about. Well, has it? Is it gone through the move to Man U? Is that actually
Yeah, that's
happened now?
confirmed, I
Yeah.
believe.
So yeah, like he's gone to Man U for close to 100 million, and there's a reason for it. They haven't. I mean, Man U typically overspend on players, but I actually think he's going to do very well at Man U. I think that's maybe it's not exactly what they needed, but he's arguably an upgrade on someone like a Martial or even a Rashford. Yeah, that was odd. I mean, you could even argue he underused Grealish a bit in the tournament as well. I know Grealish played a lot, and I have no issue with like when he brought Grealish off in the Denmark game. I didn't really have when I don't know, some people in the press seem to try to make a bit of a thing out of that. But yeah, I found that even a bit weird how Grealish is so creative and so like just even having him on, he just draws so many fouls. People panic when he's on the ball and foul him. Basically, seems to be how it works, which would have been really useful in that second half, given that Italy were actually annoyingly good at those cynical fouls, as in they knew the right moment to like hack someone and stuff. We could have done with Grealish a bit earlier, yeah, winning some fouls for us there. But no, it's odd. It's kind of when you think about Southgate, apart from Sterling, all the players earlier we were saying have kind of done better than we expected, or were kind of more defensive-minded players, and he seems to have done really well with those guys. But given the wealth of options we had in the attack, arguably he's underused a lot of guys who really should have done more, could have done more if they were given the opportunity to do more, I guess.
Well, speaking of the abundance of sort of talent in attack, and this is not just a jibe because of sort of our allegiances, obviously me being an Arsenal fan and you being a Spurs fan, but what did you make of Harry Kane's performance in the final? He took a great penalty and had a bit of a role in the opening goal, the sort of move that led up to it. But obviously, again, he's sort of like the main talisman as far as goals in particular. What did you make of his performance?
Yeah, I think, a bit of a role. I think he had quite a big role in the goal. He made a lovely pass to Kieran Trippier, who whipped it in for obviously Luke Shaw. Now, I thought in the first half he was doing that thing that he started doing for Tottenham a lot more, dropping deep. He linked up with Trippier a few times, actually, kind of spreading it over to him. And he clearly enjoys doing that as well. He likes, he obviously loves scoring goals, but he likes having more of an impact on the game than purely being the goal scorer, which is why I guess in the league he got so many assists last year when he was playing with Son. But look, I think he did pretty well overall. He maybe in the second half he didn't do as much, but then I feel like in the second half England were all over the place anyway, and there was I don't really know what more he could have done in the second half. I think he showed a lot of character to score that penalty. Obviously, thank God he stuck that rebound away. But oh my God, that was probably one of the worst Kane penalties against Denmark I've seen in forever. Basically, I mean, look, as you saw yesterday. Normally, he's such a brilliant penalty taker. But that one against Denmark, I don't know if that was just nerves kicked in for that moment. But no, I think yet again Kane has proven a lot of people wrong. I know he was pretty terrible, to be honest, in the group stages. And ironically, even in that Germany game, he wasn't amazing, but he popped up with a goal when it mattered in a big game for England. He then scored a couple against Ukraine, which is great, obviously. And then I know he messed up the penalty, but he ultimately scored the goal to take us to the semis. And I think he was okay in the final. I don't have too much of a problem with her. I don't have too much of a problem with anyone from the final. If I blame anyone, and maybe it's just harsh, it's probably more Southgate than the players, just because I feel like he got tactically outdone by Mancini, basically.
I agree with that.
It's a penalty lottery, but like you were saying earlier, I think if it was a boxing match and it was won on points, Italy probably were the better team overall, just about. I'd say it was close, but they probably were a bit better than us. But maybe, I don't know, is that a good time to talk about the Italians, the winning team? I know we...
Yeah, I think rather than just pile on the misery, because I think we obviously could do that, and a lot of people are doing that. But yeah, let's maybe shine a different light on this and praise the Italians for playing a good game. I guess maybe before we do heap praise on them, let's say one thing that's slightly controversial, that at the end of the day, the decision made was never going to be a different decision, but you don't like to see it. I suppose maybe Chiellini's grab on Saka when right at the end of, was that right at the end of normal time or at the end of extra time? I think right at the end of extra time.
Extra
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
I think.
That again, it's that thing where like if you've watched football for long enough, you know that it's a yellow card, but it kind of should be a red card. It's just blatant cheating and also actually quite aggressive and violent. Um, and if it had
Yeah,
been
I mean,
closer to the goal, it would have been a red card because he would have been kind of through. But
yeah, I
um,
mean, he made no attempt to win the ball. Arguably, Saka was through. I'm sure there's probably as in it looked like Saka did have a bit of a clear run, certainly down that right hand side of the pitch. Yeah, the Chiellini, both Chiellini and Bonucci. I mean, I'm biased with Chiellini because he said that thing about Tottenham that time, which makes me hate him, where he randomly like said this is the history of Tottenham when seemingly there was no beef between Chiellini and Tottenham. But yeah, both him and Bonucci, I thought, whilst they're quality defenders, they have that annoying habit. They just know what they can get away with essentially, and they're annoyingly they're bloody good at it. They just about stick on the right hand side of the law. And yeah, I agree with you. The thing on Saka was really bloody annoying. It's probably, yeah, like you said, if it's further up the pitch, it might be a red card. But they played long enough where they just know what it is that they have to do, and sort of fair play to them, but also they're just annoying. To be honest,
yeah,
I just find them both really like reluctantly like respect them, but I don't like either of them. I think they're twats, but you know they did what they had to do.
what do you think about them as a force moving forward? There's a lot of players in their team who are kind of still on the rise. Definitely, Chiesa's an obvious one, but there's
He
others.
was brilliant. Yeah, I mean Chiesa, just on him, I thought he'd had a brilliant tournament, but it felt like I know he didn't score last night. It felt like he almost got even better. Like, well, we've been saying how good the England defence were. It felt like they couldn't really deal with him at points when he sort of picked up some steam. But he liked cutting onto his right foot a lot. But I mean, he was, even though it's easy to say, oh, you shouldn't let him cut inside it, and felt at some points he was just playing with such pace and power and skill that it was pretty difficult for those England defenders to deal with him. And I suppose in some ways he was unlucky not to score. He had that shot in the first half, which went a bit wide, quite a good move. And then he also, I think Pickford potentially made quite a good save in the second half from him too. But I mean, the thing I just felt about the Italy team the whole tournament is that they would just the team was so collectively good. Effectively, they all knew exactly what their role was. They've had this crazy unbeaten run. Was it like 34 games?
Yeah,
Now
something like
unbeaten.
that. Yeah.
And it kind of made sense in a way from the way they played. They seem to. They just seem to have some sort of like not an arrogance about them, but a confidence that even when they weren't playing so well in the first half, their heads didn't go down. They stuck at it, kind of knowing that if they just stayed in the game, eventually the tide would turn, which it obviously did in the second half. And I think, yeah, a bit like going back to how ultimately Southgate probably screwed up a bit tactically yesterday. Mancini, you have to say he's done amazingly well with the team that weren't even in the World Cup a few years ago. So, I mean, he's I kind of forgot about Mancini for a while, but he's certainly back in the big time now, albeit on the international stage these days. But
yeah, he's done an amazing job. He had sort of like fallen from the limelight after his success at City, but now he's sort of back in a big way, and I think masterminded the success of the Italians and has been doing so since he sort of arrived, and has to take a lot of credit, even just sort of the passion that you saw from famously kind of now throughout the tournament, the images of the team huddling for a couple of the penalty shootouts and just otherwise showing so much passion in celebrating the wins that they've had, and even friggin' Bonucci with the it's going to Rome or whatever shit at the end of the game, right? The camera. God. But the point is, like, you can see how confident and sort of carefree the group is because they're just focused on one thing as a collective, and they have each other's backs, and they're all pulling in the same direction, and so that goes a long way. They remind me a lot of an Atletico Madrid team of the last sort of few years or so that have just ground out success, not always playing the most attractive football, but sort of, if you keep your eye on it, playing very, very effective football with good technical players in their side. It's just not, what everyone likes to see necessarily. But Italy sort of took that model, and I think maybe with the sort of wing back play or the full back play actually did make it quite exciting at times, especially when Spinazzola, before he got injured in the tournament. So they didn't play like boring football necessarily. If anything, they played more and more ambitious football than England did in the final. That's for sure. But yeah, they're not like, it's not the Spain team that dominated for a few years recently, and it's not the Germany side either. But they won they won the tournament.
Yeah, but it's kind of, in a way, maybe more impressive is not the right way of saying it, but because they had a lot of great players, but they didn't have like a superstar or even a few superstars like some of those other teams had, and yet they still looked brilliant. And actually, I hadn't thought about it, but you're right. They kind of do play a lot like Atletico Madrid. That's quite a good kind of comparison in a way, that they and in the same way that Atletico Madrid have like maintained a pretty consistent level performance for a number of years under Simeone. You wonder if Mancini stays there now for a bit, if they could really maybe not win the next few tournaments, but certainly be hitting semi-finals or above for a while now.
It depends on probably Bonucci and Chiellini, to be honest with you, as far as like how long they'll stick it out as Italian internationals, because behind them, off the top of my head, you've got probably there's that guy at Inter Milan. I can't remember his name. He's a left-footed centre back who's quite good. I don't know if he's even
Ambrosio, or was that someone?
No, I'm going to be like going for it for too long, so I'll just move on. But he's supposed to, despite me not knowing his name, he's quite good. And then there's a couple of other sort of, the point is there's no more Bonucci's and there's no more Chiellinis out there.
But what there is, in theory, there for a long, long time is their goalie, Donnarumma, who obviously massively played his part last night, and as he did throughout the tournament. And you've got to, I mean, what is he? He's 21 or something? 20?
I think, like 22 maybe. He could be one of the 22. Best ever. I think he could be absolutely one of the best ever.
And honestly, look, he's going to need a couple of 2 or 3 centre-backs, whatever formation they play, going forward in front of him. But you kind of get the feeling with him in goal, as long as they have like a decent enough team, he's going to be such a big asset for them for the next, I don't know, close to 20 years, probably, which is mad, but probably that's what Buffon's technically still going. And he's like 41, 42. So,
yeah. It's true. I've just looked up the name of that guy. Bastoni is
Bastoni, yeah. I've heard
he's supposed to be quite good. So they've got good players coming through, and I think, you said they don't really have any superstars, but I think they will have some superstars in the next sort of over the next few years, because Chiesa is looking like he's going to be their he's going to be their guy kind of for the next while. They've got someone who didn't even make the squad because of injury, but I think I've seen on social media has like recently gotten back to fitness and is training with his club and is going to be a Jose Mourinho player this coming season, is Zaniolo. He's someone who is very, very highly rated in Italy. I think someone who is like silent but deadly player, played a massive role in the team's success throughout the tournament, is Barella, who's young and just won Serie A with Inter. He's actually like, I think he in some ways is kind of like the second coming of Verratti, and they managed to put him out like Verratti on the same pitch, and that's not a bad combo. So they've got these guys.
They have that other guy, Sandro Tonali, who we've spoken about before. Who
I don't think he was in the squad, was he?
Yeah, and I mean he's someone who's just signed permanently for AC Milan, and by all accounts, I think had a good season for AC Milan. But yeah, he's just another midfielder they've got who, in theory, is going to have a really brilliant career. So, I mean, yeah, like you said, maybe a few of these good. Well, they're better than good. These players. Verratti's a superstar, arguably already, but like you said, maybe there will be a few superstars emerging. But as long as they play within the system the way they have been already, I mean, who knows? Maybe they will do it at Qatar, or at the very least, I think minimum semi-finals is what they have to go for at this point. We'll see.
Yeah, barring sort of Mancini going elsewhere, I think would have to sort of stand behind that. I think going into the tournament, they're a threat at this point. And yeah, again, aside from a couple of players, most of the team is just getting better and better. So we'll see how that goes. But I think rather than dwell more on Euro 2020, it was a good tournament, really entertaining games here and there, and obviously as an England fan in particular, kind of an interesting narrative to stick with until the most bitter events. But moving on from that, let's go back to our club football. The Premier League season.
I don't want them back.
Well, the season's sort of nearly around the corner. I think Arsenal rather play Hibs tomorrow in the official.
Oh, really?
First, pre-season thing. I don't know what Spurs' schedule's like, but I think don't we play each other in the pre-season game?
Yeah, there is.
That your stadium.
I think I know that it's in a tournament with Chelsea as well, and you play one game at home and one away.
It's at Market Road, probably. Just ask for five-a-side between Arsenal, Chelsea, and
yeah, why not? Why not?
But I guess, well, you seem like you don't want to talk about it, but I'll just put you on the spot then. Anyway, what are you making of Spurs' pre-season shaping up? Ins, outs, players in, managers in.
God, where do I begin? This is what's so depressing right now. I mean, we started with a positive for England, so I'll start with a positive for Tottenham. We have a manager. I know that's depressing. That's what it's got to now. Like, Nuno is our manager. I can't say that I wasn't annoyed by him being appointed, but I wasn't particularly inspired by it, given we've been sold this dream of kind of an attacking manager, whatever, restoring the Tottenham DNA, which I don't even know what that means. What Daniel Levy came out with that slightly bizarre statement. Look, Nuno Wolves weren't good last year, but prior to that, he had two pretty impressive seasons at Wolves. And even though I'm maybe not the biggest fan of his style of football, it's quite Mourinho-esque. He seems like quite a passionate guy, and maybe someone where if he can get off to a good start, someone that the fans can get behind. I think we can get onto it maybe in a bit. I think he's going to have an incredibly tough job on his hands. There's just so much for Tottenham to do at the moment. It's a bit like Arsenal, but we've got so many players at the moment that need to be sold. I don't know how many of them will actually be sold just because of the COVID transfer market where there's not that much money floating around. There's obviously the problem with Harry Kane. I had this sort of dream that maybe if England won the Euros, Kane would obviously have won something that might have made him be a bit more chilled about not leaving. Sadly, we didn't win. And if I'm brutally honest, if I was Kane, I'd probably want to leave as well, which is depressed. I can't believe I'm saying that as a lifelong Tottenham fan, but you can't blame him for wanting to leave the club at this point in time. The depressing thing is there's probably going to be like a really terrible transfer saga, which will drag on and drag on and drag on, and he might not even be sold. I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of keep him and it gets nasty. But
when does the contract run until? 2020.
Got 3 more years left, so I could see them at least keeping him another year, even against his will. Even though I think there's reports that there was some sort of gentleman's agreement, obviously not legally binding, but it wouldn't surprise me if Daniel Levy had sort of said one thing to him and is now conveniently kind of going back on that promise to Kane. It's a tricky one. It kind of feels like until the Kane situation is resolved one way or another, it's going to be very difficult to know what happens with us. But almost either way, I'm not hopeful that. Well, I'm hopeful next season will be a success for Spurs, but there's so much for Nuno to do, and like you said, the season's not that far away. I think we're linked with. We're about to sign this Japanese defender, Takahiro Tomiyasu from Bologna.
He looks quite good.
Yeah, I mean, look, I hope I've read stuff about him which suggests, like you said, he's quite good. I can't claim to know too much about him. I'd take another defender at this point, given the standard of our defending last year. It's such a tricky one to even know where to start with Tottenham. I mean, what do you think as an Arsenal fan? Obviously, we'll get onto Arsenal in a bit, but looking in at Spurs, Like, what do you think's going to happen over there? Or like, what would you be doing at Spurs if you had some say in who was coming in, who was going, etc., etc.?
I think, yeah, defensively there were obviously some issues because despite Mourinho, who is notoriously a quite a defensive expert strategist, being there, your defense was not too tight throughout the season. So I think that's
No.
personnel that needs to be addressed. You need to move on part ways from the likes of Eric Dyer and possibly even Sanchez as well, despite the massive price tag. So yeah, room for improvement. Joe Rodon looks decent, but I don't think you want to necessarily rely on him. I don't think that's fair to him for Tottenham to rely on Joe Rodon.
Yeah,
And fullbacks as well. Doherty came in, so maybe it's going to be like a resurgent time
the
for him
Nuno revival.
under Nuno. Yeah. Like the one massive positive, I guess, could be that. Although it's weird with Aurier because like he's probably been your best. Well, he's been your only really and best right back, since he's pretty much been at the club for the most part.
Did you see what happened with him a couple of weeks ago? I think I don't know if he's on holiday or if it was international duty, but he was in the Ivory Coast playing this is the most Aurier thing of all time. He was playing in a street football game, basically, with a few other players. And for some reason, in the game, he's wearing a Man U training top, which, look, I know it's not like the worst thing in the world, but you're like, come on. Why? He knows that he's just, but that's kind of Serge Aurier for you. He's just a bit of a clown. He's just like, I mean, I guess I want him to leave my club, basically.
I guess in like a full circle way, the fact that that's being taken back in the Ivory Coast, where you can assume he's probably come a pretty damn long way from. I think he'd been living in France for a while, so I don't know how long he was in Ivory Coast. But anyway, like he's come a long way from wherever he started to Spurs. So on some levels, from a human perspective, like who can blame him for getting a bit carried away, I guess, and sort of just like enjoying things and not taking it too seriously, because he's probably experienced things that are a lot more serious than did his brother, did he have an unfortunate
his brother got shot dead sadly last year.
Yeah, so like why does he he doesn't give a fuck about football, Serge Aurier, he cares about his family and stuff like that, and making sure that they have a good life for generations to come. And it's your fault as Spurs, sorry, for signing him in the first place, because Arsenal were linked with him for a very long time, and there was always notoriously, since he was at Toulouse, issues about his attitude. That's why. And that's he didn't last at PSG, so it's like another sort of Levy masterclass.
I know. That was our grand replacement for Kyle Walker.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, like you said, beyond Aurier, there's look, and he, like you said, ironically, actually, at points he can be quite good depressing. Compared
he wants to be.
There's so many players that need to go. The Kane situation is going to drag on for a while. When you bear all of that in mind, even if we bring in a few people, even that situation gets solved, I don't think Nuno's going to be able to get something going in pre-season. It feels like the start of the season is going to be rough. And actually, our first game is against Man City at home. Ironically, our second game is at Molineux against Wolves. So very realistically, when you assume Man City will probably beat us, they might not, but probably will. And then given we're going to Molineux and you assume the Wolves team and the fans, if the fans are back, are going to be pretty pumped, that could be a very tough game as well. We could quite realistically have 0 points from the first two games.
Or you could have a full stadium at home to City where Nuno's managed to sort of like get these guys on their top game for a massive game, and sort of, the Nuno effect, a new manager can sort of galvanize them, and you could win that game and you could go on and beat Wolves away from home and you could have 6 points.
I hope you're right.
Like
I really hope you're right.
I think like you just never know. You just never know is the point.
But it feels like I think you're right, as in that it could go either way, and maybe we'll get lucky first game back with loads of supporters. But the problem, I think, is if it does go badly, I think given the anti-Levy stuff at the moment, rightly so, and the general discontentment around Tottenham fans, people are going to lose patience very quickly, whether that's right or wrong. So I just really hope, for Nuno's sake, that we do have at least even if we're not winning, that there's something to be excited about, because it could get quite unpleasant quite quickly, I think.
Well, before we move on to Arsenal's side of things, I guess let me ask you, is there someone we're going to be seeing a lot more of this season? Are we going to see Ryan Sessegnon? Are we going to see Oliver Skip? Are we going to see any of these guys?
Yeah, I mean, there was a little chuckle in your voice there at Oliver Skip. I think, well, this sounds so stupid. Look, apparently, I can't claim I watched many Norwich games last year, but apparently, I think he got their player of the season in a season where they destroyed the championship, which is, it's not the
Is he not
Premier
going
League.
back on? Wouldn't you just loan him back? Sorry to interrupt.
No. No, they've just got Billy Gilmore, so they kind of replaced.
Yeah.
They kind of filled that young Premier League loanee role. But I think, given how Winks is regressing pretty badly and hopefully will be sold. Apparently, Villa seem to be interested in everyone though, so who knows if that's true. But hopefully, Winks will be sold. Hopefully, Sissoko will go. He probably won't. But if we can shift a few of those players, I think it really opens up an opportunity for, even if Skips, he's not our starting centre mid. I think he will play quite a bit actually, and I would not be surprised. Look, I really like Ryan Sessegnon as well, but he seems to primarily play as a wing back, and you'd think Reguilon will remain the number one wing back for the time being. I think Skip is the one out of those two who will probably be more likely to break into the team and impress people. But then in the Conference League, which we are depressingly in, the likes of Dane Scarlett, I mean, he's only 17, so again, it could be a false dawn, he's so young, but him and that Alfie Devine guy who scored in the FA Cup for us, who's also 17 early in the season, I think, it will be really interesting to see those guys in this slightly pathetic tournament, but maybe, again, that will be a positive that we'll get to see some of the young players a bit more. But I don't know, Kai. I can't say I'm that hopeful things will go well. Well, I am. I said it. I'm hopeful, but I'm not confident. But anyway, enough about Tottenham before I get too panicky. Let's talk about Arsenal, who clearly, like Spurs, are in a bit of a tricky situation. First time in ages you haven't made it into Europe, which we might get. Maybe that's a good thing. But look, I guess starting off, Arteta, it's a big summer ahead for him. Presumably, he needs to get this pre-season and the transfers right. I know that's not all down to him, but yeah, how important is this summer to Arteta, do you think?
It's make or break, and it started kind of shakily because we brought in officially finally, what was it, a signing, Nuno Tavares from Benfica.
Left back from Benfica,
backup left back, giving me strong Ali Sissoko vibes. So I'm not overly excited about that. He reminds me in some ways of Kolasinac as well, who I think we're probably desperately trying to sell. In theory, that's probably Kolasinac's replacement. But yeah, anyway, we'll see about that. He's young. Benfica produce good young players. We've signed him. He's an Arsenal player now, so I'll back him. And he's a backup to Tierney. So it's not like a massive kind of gamble on this guy. We're not investing too much money or faith in the guy yet. So it is what it is. The flip side is the Saliba loan.
Oh yeah, that's all
to
been
Marseille, I guess. Yeah, like that's kind of, again, I'm not gonna weigh in on it yet because what people on Twitter seem to forget is that Saliba still actually is quite young and hasn't played in the Premier League yet, and like plenty of players come into the Premier League later in their careers and are successful, and it's fine. So like if he has a great season at Marseille and then is ready to come back into the team and play, then cool. If we are spending reportedly 50 million on Ben White's going to partner Gabriel or Holding or Mari or whatever, and our defense that was one of the best defenses in the Premier League last season gets even better, which you couldn't necessarily guarantee that it would do from Saliba. And you can't guarantee that it will from Ben White either, but there's a bit more common sense to that signing. Then like it's a great play from Arteta to get Saliba more first team action somewhere at a good level and bring in a centre back who's going to improve the team at the same time, and then be able to bring Saliba back later. So like I'm not going to judge that, but a lot of people have sort of given up on Arteta purely because of the Saliba and the Guendouzi situation too, where he's sort of taken a player who was worth X amount in Guendouzi before he arrived and now is I think we've got an obligation in Marseille to sign him for 10 mil at the end of the season, which is kind of disappointing. Basically means we'll sort of like break even on our investment in him in the first place, maybe profit slightly. So that hasn't gone great. If Ben White comes in, that'll be good. We need to also sign a creative midfielder. Seems like we're signing this guy, Sami Lokonga from Anderlecht, as I think a backup player in midfield with a quite high ceiling. He's young, so that sounds like good business. That's the type of business that you see other clubs doing, signing young players and, improving them.
Quite a Leicester City type signing.
Yeah, 100%. And that's a good model recently. And on the flip side of that, Xhaka seems to be on his way to play for Mourinho.
Which that seems to make sense, to be honest. That kind of
it does. I think they'll get on quite well until they don't get on anymore, and then it'll be a spectacular falling out. But otherwise, like Xhaka, Arsenal fans need to be careful what they wish for, because he's actually been quietly one of our best players since Arteta arrived in particular, and has been not just performances doing well, but like sits in that kind of linchpin central midfield position that needs to be replaced. And since he's been at the club, we haven't been able to sort of play players ahead of him and have them be successful for any decent amount of time. So it's not like it's just a position that's going to take care of itself. We've got Joe Willock coming through. Is it being held to one side for him? I don't think so. I think we're going to sign a big player in there. And then we just need to shift bodies. We've done that a bit starting out. It looks like we're trying to still get rid of someone like Bellerin, even Willian. Louise is gone. Guendouzi's gone. Saliba, I guess, is gone for the time being. So that just creates space. And we're getting on with it. But it's a massive, massive summer, and it is all still to play for in the transfer market for Arsenal. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But I think the general feeling from Arsenal fans at the end of last season was that we finished where we finished in spite of ourselves, and that we could have actually finished much higher if we just weren't idiots at certain points throughout the season, either that being Arteta or the players on the pitch making the wrong decision or missing chances. But we weren't actually that far off. And given how bad we did start, had we not had that awful start, which you'd think we might not happen again to us anytime too soon, hopefully, as an Arsenal fan, then we would have been basically in the fight for fourth place, and we definitely would have been in Europe, because we just about missed out on it, which I'm not upset about if we had to miss out on the Conference League. So it is what it is. What's your take on Arsenal?
Yeah, Arsenal are a very weird team, I think, more so than Tottenham, in that, I don't know, maybe there's grounds for more optimism at Arsenal at the moment than Spurs, which is depressing to say. But I don't know. It was a bit like last year after when Arteta won the FA Cup, and then you started the season. I remember I know it was Fulham, but that first game of the season, Arsenal looked quite good and quite confident, and then maybe you won a couple of other games. I don't know. It just you feel like you're a sort of team that, I don't know if like mentally quite a fragile team. Like when you hit a bad patch of run, bad form, for about 4 or 5 games, Arsenal are going to be a bit crap. Like you said, the challenge this year for Arsenal is to, when the bad form comes, to limit it to just 2 or 3 games and kind of not let it fester. And just that period last year when you were losing to Burnley, and I know Leicester, I forget who it was. You lost loads of games on the bounce in a very un-Arsenal-like way. I think that's just like you said, actually, the defence was quite good the second half of the season, once you brought Smith Rowe in, and once, obviously Saka. I can't believe I'm saying this, poor Bukayo Saka at the moment. Once like him and Smith Rowe were doing better, you looked pretty good. I mean, I don't know. I feel Arsenal, like I said, maybe there's grounds for a bit more optimism, but honestly, I couldn't tell you at the moment how Arsenal are going to do next year. I don't know if you're just going to have a terrible start and Arteta will get sacked and someone new will come in, or if actually this no Europe is going to really work to your advantage and suddenly you have a little run at the top 4 because you can effectively focus everything on that. I don't know. It's a very, very tricky one. And maybe as well, we'll have to wait and see what, like you said, you've signed Tavares. It looks like the Conga's coming, and no doubt you'll sign a couple of other players. It'll be hard, but I guess you asked me the question about who at Spurs will come good this year. I mean, off the top of my head, the guy that I wonder what you think that Balogun, the striker, he finally signed his new contract. Looks like Nketiah might leave, and so that opens up a place in the squad for Balogun. Are we going to be seeing quite a bit of him this year? What is he someone that could potentially burst onto the scene?
He would have been one of those guys in line had we made the Conference League to sort of be a starter potentially, or at least get minutes in that. I think he scored possibly on his debut in the Europa League or in a cup competition for Arsenal last season, perhaps. So he's talked about and rated very highly. It's just hard when you've got players who, well, actually, Lacazette didn't underperform last season. His numbers actually were quite decent. Aubameyang fell off a cliff last season from a player who had back-to-back, seasons scoring, tens and tens of goals.
Wasn't his finest season, I think it's fair to say. Yeah.
Of course, conveniently for him, after we signed him up to a massive contract as well. So why does he care? But anyway, that was essentially our downfall for the most part last season, was scoring goals and having, multiple players scoring goals. And when your leading goal scorer goes from a top scorer in the league to a nothing player in the league goal scoring wise, that's a big difference. If take the goals away from Harry Kane, and it's a grim thought for Spurs fans. So I don't know if Balogun's going to get the minutes, just because of how, one, you don't want to again lean on a player like that. That's a big responsibility to put on someone, and then also just the personalities around him. You just can't really see him getting ahead of Aubameyang and Lacazette if both of them are still at the club. So we'll see. But I think we're not going to see, I don't think, too much of a breakthrough. Hopefully I'm wrong, but it happened with Smith Rowe already. It happened with Saka already. It sort of happened with Willock at Newcastle already. So if he gets minutes, I guess that would be the one that you'd really have an eye on in an Arsenal shirt. So we'll see. I just think that I'm quite positive if the recruitment ends up being done well this summer, that we're in a decent position because of how we ended the season last season, and how, like I said, if we hadn't started so poorly, we actually would be in with a shout. If we can keep Tierney fit, if we can keep Gabriel fit, or whoever his first choice pairing of centre-backs is fit, and get someone to play alongside Thomas Partey, play Smith Rowe and Saka and Pepe every week. We've got Martinelli floating around. We've got Lacazette and Aubameyang. I think we should. They agree with me. That's Zeus. Zeus is like, you tell him about Arsenal's prospects for the upcoming season. I think we should be aiming to finish. I think we should be aiming to challenge for the top four, to be honest with you. I know that sounds really ambitious, but that's kind of where I stand. Because under Arteta, we've beaten those teams. We've beaten Chelsea. We've beaten Manchester United. We've beaten Spurs. We've done it. We've beaten Liverpool. We have beaten Liverpool.
It shows you that's not the problem then. The challenge that he has to solve this year is almost against the lesser teams not screwing up as much, and also I think the main thing for Arsenal, it's just if the heads drop, Arteta has to find a way of really increasing morale quickly, because like I said, that's the only thing at the moment. There does seem to be a little bit of a soft touch to Arsenal, and maybe that's just because it's a fairly young team in a way, but who knows? Look, I hope you're terrible and it all gets... You've got the Amazon series, so it would be great if you just happen to have a terrible season and it's all captured on this Amazon documentary, but we'll just have to wait and see. It could go the other way. It could be a depressingly, like, Arsenal randomly have a great season out of nowhere, but who knows?
I hope that's the case. I feel like it's almost a guarantee that it's going to go terribly now that we've signed up for this documentary.
I hope so.
But
really.
I guess just on that note, one last thing before we leave. Who are going to be the standout personalities? I think everyone sort of came to either love or hate even more than they already did someone like Dele Alli, and there was the whole like Danny Rose storyline, the Harry Kane stuff. Who's gonna be, make a prediction for sort of like maybe a twist or something along the season? Who's gonna get a lot of camera time?
Oh my God. I have a feeling in a weird way. I don't know what he's. I don't know, like if Tierney could become a bit of a character just because he seems like such an old-fashioned. I don't know if they'll just kind of they'll focus. Maybe he won't be vocal, but he'll just be quite different to quite a lot. It might be just quite interesting to see how he kind of interacts within the modern world of football, where he seems as pretty much as old school as it gets from like a footballer perspective. But I don't know. There's definitely a few characters within that Arsenal squad, so I'm sure it will be entertaining.
Yeah, I think Saka might sort of get a bit of the limelight, and we'll
God,
see how that
that's
goes.
just on that note. Like I said it earlier, but yeah, coming from a Tottenham fan and an England fan, obviously, I really do feel for the guy because he had a great Euros. You on our little group we have with some of our guests that come on the show, I know you predicted he'd have a good tournament, which he did do. He had a great tournament, but yeah, what a shame that it was him really to miss that decisive one. It's a real shame for everyone, I think, given he's so young, and you just have to hope that he can mentally recover from that, because that's a tough thing to happen at a young age.
I think we'll see, because honestly, this is actually kind of his first big setback in his career. So this is kind of a defining moment for him in some ways. But I think he's either going to come back stronger, just because that's all he does is just play well, or he's going to be affected by it. So let's hope not. And I think, again, yeah, just before we go, however many people are listening to this, we've got to condemn the reaction of people who took it to a racial place with the likes of Sancho, Rashford, and Saka, and not to be a super negative person, apart from obviously pointing negativity towards that type of behavior. The first thing that I said after I think it was Sancho had missed was I turned to my friend at the pub and I said, I bet Sancho and Rashford are going to have probably already gotten in the seconds that have passed racial abuse, because, and that's sad that thought popped into my mind, and that it was vindicated as well. And obviously Saka went on to miss a penalty as well, and so
I think sadly that thought it definitely popped into my mind, and I think sadly as we saw from what actually did go on to happen. Yeah, like you said, we could go on for that for a while, but social media companies need to do a lot more, because it's a disgrace, basically, the whole thing.
Yeah, it's disgusting, and I won't even try to get inside the mind of the people who do stuff like that, because it doesn't make any sense. And yeah, I can't speak strongly enough about how they need to reflect upon their actions and change them, and take a look at themselves. So we'll maybe try to find a lighter note to end on than that. Maybe, yeah, hoping for Arsenal to put in a great performance. Hopefully I'll be hearing about a Nuno Tavares hat trick against Hibs from left back by the end of tomorrow, when this podcast should be out.
Yeah. My thing is, hopefully by the time this podcast comes out, Eric Dyer is no longer at Tottenham. That's my hope.
Is that happening?
Okay. No, that's not. That's just, and I mean, that's a bit mean. I'm sorry, Eric. I don't want you to be at Tottenham anymore. Sorry, mate.
No, sorry, Eric. Yeah, I'll echo that, or whatever. Get out of Tottenham, Eric. My buddy doesn't want you there anymore. You and your brother can fight people somewhere else, not at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, unless you're a visiting fan. Anyways, listeners, viewers, we are on YouTube, of course. If you have enjoyed that, please do give us another listen, another view next time. Find us on all your favorite streaming platforms. As far as podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're all over the place. Just look for United Mates Football Podcast. Likewise on YouTube, subscribe there. And then on social media, you can keep track of everything that we are tweeting, Instagramming, Facebooking. I think the last two are lesser used than tweeting, but just roll with it. We're doing all that stuff. We've got a website as well. That's unitedmatesfp.com. And then for the social handles, it's just United Mates FP at United Mates FP. Until next time, everyone. Cheers again, Joe. Listeners, viewers, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Goodbye.